It's time for the chip race.
We're joined now by the man of the moment, the man who up until 2 weeks ago had less than 2k in Hendon Mob cashes, all of which he got at his local £10 game in Napoleon's Casino and Restaurant in Hull. The man who has charmed his way into all our hearts on his way to coming fourth at the World Series of Poker main event for $2.6 million. The man with the flowery jacket. I am, of course, talking about John Hesp. John, thank you so much for joining us on the chip race. It's a huge treat to have you on so soon after the big day.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, David. Obviously, I did mention earlier that I would try and contact you, which I did, and now I'm a little bit less tired than I was before. I feel as if I'm up for an interview.
That's great, yeah. I really appreciate it, John. How long are you back from Vegas? It's actually not that long, I don't think.
Well, it was a week ago today I actually arrived back home. It's in fact about this time, around about 10 p.m. I arrived back from Vegas, which was a bit of a grueling flight, and considering I had to go via Frankfurt to get back to Manchester, but we made it anyway. That's the main thing.
That's good. Yeah, ironically, I came back through Manchester and I spent 8 hours in Manchester airport waiting for a 1 hour flight to Dublin.
Oh my goodness me. Yeah. So you had a bit of a long one then.
Indeed, yeah. And then a few days later, I was actually in Manchester for a tournament. And somebody actually asked me at the table in Manchester, how long are you back from Vegas? And I was so tired, I couldn't remember. I was like, I think it's 2 or 3 days, but I'm not sure.
No, I understand where you're coming from. Especially when I was on the, that World Series. If you were to ask me specific days and things like that, I can't answer them because they just all rolled into one. Especially when we did sort of 3 solid days back-to-back 12, 13-hour of poker. I think you guys will probably be aware that this year they changed the format a little bit, and, the November 9 was sort of rolled into July, wasn't it?
Yeah. I remember there was a lot of speculation before it started that would make it difficult for amateur players who are not used to sort of playing that much poker, but also for older players. So it's great to see someone like yourself actually go the whole way and be there right till the end.
Well, I did survive it, Dara, and I think you guys were probably watching it when it took place, and I think it's fair to say the day one of the final table, the first 3 hands were quite exciting, weren't they?
Yeah, I think David actually has some questions about that. It was an amazing start to the final table, and I mean, You basically dominated the final table in the sense of your personality, just how much you seem to be enjoying the event.
Absolutely, and when I say dominated, I'm probably a little bit less than that, but I was absolutely enjoying it. There was no question about that, and it was. I think that showed through clearly on the TV footage that I had.
Absolutely. Well, look, John, one of the things I know our listeners are definitely keen on finding out about, I know it's something I'm dying to hear about because it was so unusual to see a British poker player go so deep, who I didn't already know. Like, we're such a kind of tightly knit community. You came out of nowhere. So I guess the question on everyone's lips maybe is, how did you get into poker?
Well, I think it's fair to say if I originally, I've said to various news medias from different places, from being a child, before we had TV, we used to play cards as a family. My 2 sisters and parents would play things like whist and solo and other bits, things like that. And, since then, I've sort of always had an interest in cards. And I probably took up poker about 25 years ago, and I used to play at my local gentleman's club in Bridlington here in East Yorkshire, England. I used to play 7-card stud. And I think probably when Channel 4 over here started to broadcast late night poker, did I sort of get interested in, Texas Hold'em. So it's fair to say that whilst we all know that, poker hands have always remained the same in all different forms of the game, it didn't take too long to get used to playing Texas Hold'em. Originally, when I started playing it in Hull, the Napoleons in Hull, it used to be sort of pot limit Hold'em, and then I think it gradually changed to no limit, which becomes, I think, more the international game as opposed to the pot limit version. And so in fairness, I would say I've probably been playing Texas Hold'em for probably about 15 years, and probably poker as in general about 25 years.
Wow, yeah, that's a pretty wealth of experience. You also mentioned in a number of your interviews that you played the WSOP Main Event because it was on your bucket list. How long in advance did you decide you were going to play the main event this year?
Well, it was probably only about, I think May. May was the time that I sort of mentioned it to my wife. And she was a bit shocked because I hadn't said anything to anybody before that. But she did say, you know, if that's what I wanted to do, she would support me, even though she didn't particularly want me to go away for 2 weeks. But that being said, it turned out to be 3 weeks that I was away at the end. And, you guys know the rest. So in other words, it was about May this year that I, you know, sort of decided to go. And I asked a pal of mine in Bridlington if he fancied joining me, and he said he would. Now, I don't know whether you guys were out there yourselves, but there was obviously over 7,200 entrants this year, so they had to play 3-day ones.
Yeah.
There was Saturday, Sunday, and the Monday, which were the 3 days. And myself and my pal, actually played our day one on the Saturday. But after we played day one and got through there, we obviously had a couple of 3 days free. So, you know, between then and, of course, the previous days, we just played a little bit of small tournaments at the Stratosphere, but also at the Rio, and we went to the Venetian. The Rio were playing these daily...
the daily deep stacks.
I think they were $235.
Yeah, the daily deep stacks, I think they called them.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. We played, I think, 2 or 3 of those, and neither of us really came anywhere significant in them, but it was sort of good to get into some practice and get into the mood, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. You're obviously saving the run good for something more important. We alluded to it a little bit earlier on, but you know, it's obviously the most grueling tournament in terms of the long days. I think you play about 80 hours in total to kind of get heads up. You pretty much did that. You always seem to be having fun at the table, but at the end of a day like that, you must have still been really exhausted. Would you have preferred to have had the November 9 concept and had a few months off? Or did you prefer to just keep going and run with, you know, I guess the good fortune and the dynamics and the adrenaline that was probably still pumping through your veins?
Well, I've never experienced it before, so I've never know what the November 9 was like. But I think if I were to express an opinion based on what I would think I prefer to do what I did and continue it right the way through, even though it was grueling and lots of hours of back-to-back poker. To get it over in, if you like, within the certain period, I think it would be better. And I think it was also better probably for television audiences around the world, because you didn't have to wait all that time to find out who'd won, basically. And no, I think I would favour the method they've gone for, even though there was a little bit of grueling poker involved.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think it used to kind of mess up the tournament, that they got to a certain point and then they just stopped and we all came back in 3 or 4 months, and you know, it didn't have the same flow to it.
Yeah.
I remember when they introduced the concept of the November 9, the idea was that it would give players a few months to hype themselves up for the final table, but to be honest, I'm not sure it really worked as an experiment.
No, the other thing is as well, Dara, in relation to that, it also gave, you know, the pros and those who were really into it the opportunity to sort of view some of the sort of footage that we'd been run, you know, before that, and get some sort of feedback on how the players were actually carrying on. Now, to some extent, you know, people might well say, well, what's wrong with that? But, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't really have gone into it to that extent. I would have still played the game I did anyway, irrespective. But what I'm actually saying is they wouldn't have the opportunity to be able to look back at things that I was doing, particularly in any detail. I know they could obviously look back 30 minutes after the event, and indeed that was happening on the final table. Yeah. I mean, that you could clearly there was a lot more sort of intense interest in, what cards people were having in relation to the others than what was with me. I wasn't really bothered what they had. I mean, at the end of the day, I was playing it largely for recreation, and it was quite financially beneficial, the outcome to me, as you know.
Sure, yeah. So, did you do any preparation for the final table? Because you had a few days off between, when the final table was formed and when you actually played it out, or did you just chill for those days?
No, I think realistically, by the final table, my wife and 2 sons and daughter and 2 daughters came over and joined me. So we did actually spend just a little bit of time together. We didn't go anywhere in particular, but we dined out and just had a little wander around some of the hotels, the Bellagio and Caesar's Palace, and that was more or less it.
Well, John, I'm itching to get to that final table. Obviously, all the lights, all the cameras, the world of poker watching you. That opening hand of the final table versus Anton Saout, where you called a 3-bet and then you check raised him on the flop. It really demonstrated how you were going to proceed on this final table. You're obviously a natural showman, and it was brilliant for TV. But at another level, I did think you might have been throwing down the gauntlet a bit. To what degree was this a power move against your foes at the table, or was it just purely you having fun?
It was me having fun, but it's. I think King 9 were talking. Was it King 9 were talking?
Yeah, King 9 against Ace Jack.
Yeah, and well, of course, I mean, you saw the outcome of it. I didn't know Saout had Ace at all at the time, but clearly, I was showboating a little bit to some extent, and
it was brilliant though.
I was genuinely having so much fun. But just a few minutes before the start, Scott Brumstein turned to me and says, "How are you going to play the final table, then, John? Are you going to carry on playing as you did in the others with with the fun?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to think so, but it depends on the hands and how I feel at the time." I thought, well, I was dealt a King 9 and I was in good position. I thought, well, let's have a go, let's have some fun. I was second chip leader. I could afford to actually lose a few to Saout. And of course I played the hand. It was certainly spectacular, and
it sure was.
I actually felt a little bit sorry for him when I threw my cards down afterwards, because he didn't show his cards and I didn't learn until a long time afterwards what he had. But I guess, I saw the expression on his face when I threw them down and showed King 9. It was probably like sticking a dagger in his stomach and twisting it, but I didn't really do it for that purpose, if you know what I mean. I was genuinely intent on having some fun and also lightening up the rest of the people on the table. I think I did that with the exception of Saout and and the audience, and the viewing people around the world.
Yeah, no, it certainly was incredible TV, and also trusting your instinct, I think, is huge in that sport.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have the courage of their convictions there. They might suspect that something is up, but they wouldn't actually be able to put the chips in.
Well, I think it's fair to say that when you say trust your instincts, I mean, I made numerous interviews with TV media and radio, etc. whilst I was over there, and people were saying, they were asking me what did I attribute my success to, and how did I play, and how did I know what to do and when to do it. Well, obviously I didn't get everything right, as you know, especially when I walked into pocket aces against my ace 10, but that's what I don't particularly want to remember too much. But you all saw that, and it really was a big hit. But what I was really getting at, I think on the whole, I made a decision based on a gut feeling and my head. I'd worked out the combination of what might be out on there, and used both the gut feeling, the body language I was getting from people, and a little bit of speech play, which I think was discussed, and to turn around and say I know exactly what I was going to do before I did it would be wrong, because I don't believe even the pros can answer that one.
Yeah.
What I did say about, a lot of the players who were actually on these tables were, and I was talking to them quite, openly about it, because even when you're on TV, you sort of mic'd up, but they turn the mic off when you're not really in the hand. So, you can have conversations that are not being heard by you guys at home with different ones. And I used to say things like, why do you take so long to fold a hand when you already know in the first 10 seconds that you're going to fold? Why do you have to wait a minute or two to do it? But you understand what I mean?
I do, yeah.
I can't get my head around that. It's just, it's something that certainly doesn't make for good TV. When somebody's sat, sort of pondering a decision when they've already made it 3 minutes earlier.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think you were a complete breath of fresh air in that respect. And you mentioned wanting to bring fun back to poker. To what degree do you think your presence at the table made the professionals lighten and loosen up?
Oh, I think they did. I think the point was, I remember meeting up with Ben Lamb early in the proceedings, and it was quite funny because I was still the same person in the earlier stages as I was at the final table. And I could really, when Ben would put a raise in, and I'd cut this, I'm talking about pre-final table, this, probably several days before, probably when there was still the high hundreds. He would put a raise in and I'd come over the top of him and things like that. And then, he would fold and I would show a hand which would probably a bluff or something like that. And he says, I can't figure you out, man. I can't figure you out. Well, I said, good. I said, that's exactly how it's supposed to be, Ben. I don't. And the first person to say that because I was actually playing completely unorthodox poker. And I was playing it what I called the John Hesp way and having fun at the same time.
Yeah, that really came across, and I think you definitely gave the professionals a lot more trouble than somebody who was playing a game more that they'd be more familiar with. I think that really came across.
Well, I think this is what I tended to find when other people were sort of asking me these questions. And, you probably saw Cara Scott and others interviewing me on, for the TV. Yeah. And they say, have you ever read any poker books? I said, never read one in my life. Have you ever had any professional poker schooling? Never. And of course, all these sort of things, and they were just completely to say that someone who has had, no professional training and no history of any sort of great wins in the past, to get to that stage or to the final table and certainly finish fourth, it was virtually unheard of from a nobody.
I think what made it such an incredible story was that you were literally the archetypal recreational player, but also then when you got there, you actually continued playing the same way that you had, and you still had fun. You basically didn't freeze on the big occasion, which I think is always the fear you have when, if a recreational player somehow gets into that situation, that they'll let the occasion get to them. But it was clear that didn't happen with you at all. As you went through the tournament, did you feel nervous or did you just enjoy the whole experience?
No, like I said, I never really felt any nerves at all going through because it was just so much fun and pleasure. And the fact that I was having fun and lightening the mood of some of these really solemn, and I'm calling the phrase poker phrase people, not just professionals, but also amateurs who, had this, they put their sunglasses on and then they put their hoodies up and they put their they put their headphones on and all this sort of thing. Well, I sort of chiseled my way through that sort of thing, and what initially was sort of completely blank face, he started to smile, and usually by after an hour or so, they were probably laughing and smiling, and I hope they got something out of it besides me.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of those things that, until you're tested, you really don't know how you're going to do under pressure. Are there other activities that you did before where sort of that competitive edge was tested?
Well, no, not really. I am actually I am a self-employed businessman who built up my own caravan sales business in Bridlington over 30 years. So I have actually been used to sort of dealing negotiations and dealing. So from that perspective, I wasn't without experience communicating with all sorts of different people, and I think to some extent that does help in the game of poker. I will say that my own personal demeanour is one of certainly a social person who likes to interact with other people and have some fun. But in the case of a lot of these younger guys, there were obviously a very large number of young people in it. They probably spent many hours, obviously, in the game, behind a computer screen playing online, and I think to some extent, in doing so, they don't develop the same social skills.
That's definitely true.
And I'm not just talking about playing online. I'm talking about any sort of, computer games, whether it be Grand Theft Auto or these combat games that they play. Kids that spend sort of hours and hours and hours behind a computer screen do not get to develop what I call proper life and social skills. So when they get face to face with real people, some of them struggle to understand how to actually connect, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I think quite a lot of the people there were in that sort of zone. Until I arrived, of course.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you were a real breath of fresh air on that front. And what was great was too that that you were the recreational player who came through, because your personality was perfectly suited to the occasion. You really got across that sense of fun. Now that you've had the taste of a big final table, do you think you'll play more big poker tournaments, or is that just an item ticked off the bucket list now?
Well, this is something that really I have to sort of. I've said quite openly to everybody that I am not going to become professional, and I don't want to be professional because I don't think I'll enjoy the game in the same way as I did there. I'd like to think I will be able to recreate the fun and experience I had over there, but you never really know until you're in the moment. If I'd come in the top 1,000, cashed, I would have been more than that. In fact, that was my dream, just to be able to play in it and get in the top 1,000, get $15,000, pay my entry fee and the expenses as well. Everything else was just a bonus. $2.6 million was just beyond my wildest dreams. But what I was going to say, as well as where I'm coming on to, and I don't wish to sound big-headed in any way when I say this, but despite the fact that I only came fourth, I do think that there was more media interest in me than there was some of the people the guys that sort of came above me. And I think that's probably because of the story that's behind it more than anything else. Yeah,
I think that's undeniable. I mean, you were the person that everybody was talking about at the next tournament that I went to, and it's like, in a sense, it's unfair when somebody wins and people just kind of forget about him because he's very similar to the previous winners, and he's just one of a bunch of 1,000 young guys that could have won the tournament. But you completely broke the mold, and also just you brought so much entertainment beyond merely being on the final table. And I think you also made the final table more fun for everybody else. Like you said, it did seem like the pros lightened up. The interaction between the pros on this final table was much more relaxed and more fun than on previous final tables. And indeed, I think that was basically down to you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that as well. And actually, I wanted to ask you, John, as well, if I could. I can only imagine you maybe being inundated with offers now. You say you only want to play recreationally a few times a year, perhaps. That would more fit with your life and your business and whatnot. But they must be all knocking your door down at the moment. Like, you can't believe the lengths we went to just to be able to find your phone number.
The thing is, Matt, I've got my iPad going and battery's just about running out, so I'm trying to think that I get my phone going. But listen, you might have 2 or 3 minutes left, gents, so I'm going to have to escape it short.
I love it.
Okay, we're on the battery race here.
I've got lots of offers to sort of go into different places around America and opening and playing charity events and things like that. But I think probably one of the biggest thing is I've had a couple of people wanting to do movies. And there's one relatively big company, I won't mention it at the moment because there's a couple involved.
Sure.
They want to do a movie on my story, which is quite remarkable. I mean, when you think of a regular guy from a small town in Yorkshire, England, going through to Vegas and to play a game of poker on his bucket list, I never, in my wildest dreams, thought that anybody would be interested in that. But
I can see Tom Hanks in the role right now.
Well, I said, what about George Clooney? Don't you think George Clooney?
Yeah, that's much better, actually. He could probably pull off your hat as well.
I'm sure. But no, seriously, it's just been an absolute dream. I've lived the dream. And there are still people around the world all wanting a piece of me in some form or another. So I want to try and oblige if I can. And whilst I said I'm not going to go professional, I would probably be happy to maybe do 6 to 9 sort of appearances or events a year in an amateur capacity. And that being said, I don't really want to do any more than that.
Well, speaking from two people who certainly wanted a piece of you as well, John, we're really appreciative that you gave us your time. I was just wondering about that bucket list of yours, and perhaps there's something else on it, maybe, I don't know, winning Wimbledon or... No,
I think the next one I've said is on tape as well, was to try and bring a big poker event to Bridlington, which is a small coastal town in Yorkshire.
Great idea.
And I'd like to bring some of my success, if I could, to the townsfolk who have suffered badly with the recession and the downturn in tourist traffic to the region. So if I can do that, I would like that. I'd like to think I could do that in the town. So that's probably the next item I can say is on my bucket list. So there you are. Wow. Will that do, gentlemen?
That's wonderful, John. Thank you very much.
You have my contact details one way or another, and if ever you want to talk to me again, you can always come through to me in this way.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, John. We really appreciate this, and I know we've kept you longer than we said we would, and we've almost killed your battery.
Okay.
It's been an absolute treat to talk to you tonight. And on behalf of Dara and I for the chip race, thank you so much, John Hesp.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thanks, John.
We'll stay in touch. All the best.